a little bit extra time for anybody that's running a little bit behind, and then we'll get the class started. A little bit extra time for anybody that's running. All right. Recording is set, Bob. We're good on that end.
Maybe.
Usually gives till about 5 past, so we'll give it a few more minutes. It's funny, I say we give the 5 past, 4 past, 5 past, and every time I do that and I start doing my start, somebody else pops in. Happens almost like clockwork. But they can sense I'm getting ready to start. Victoria and Joe are joining us, or at least Victoria, at the very least.
Yeah.
I never know because sometimes it's both of them, sometimes it's one of them. Good morning, welcome. Hi, Victoria, how are you? She's muted, but I can hear I can see her mouthing good morning. Good morning to those also who's just joining us. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes. Just hang tight with us for just a few more minutes and we'll get started. Oh, one more minute, we'll get started. Once again, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Bill Parmentier. I'm normally your behind the scenes host for these classes, but today I am actually going to be talking about uh, drones and residential construction. Uh, and my dear friend Bob Sellis is going to be our behind the scenes host for today. So you got to give him a little bit of grace because
It's not my usual job.
it's not Bob's usual job, and he will do his best to take care of the job that I normally do, but he's a self-admitted non-techie, so uh, hopefully everything goes smoothly. We won't have any issues. Today's class is a non-credit class. Doesn't mean it's a bad class. It just means, unfortunately, we haven't gotten the permission from the state to offer this as a certificate class. We do allow these classes. Oh, sorry, we should need to back that up for a second. We do like these classes to be interactive. As such, I have the microphones unlocked. So at any point in time, you please feel free to stop me. You can ask any questions you'd like. All you have to do is look down the bottom left-hand corner of your screen where the microphone icon is. Right now, you should see a red line through it. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, just click on that microphone icon until the red line goes away. And microphone is working properly, we should be able to hear you. Only request I do have is once you've asked your question or made your comment, please make sure um, mute yourself afterwards. It just cuts down any background noise that could distract from the class. Please don't be insulted if you forget to mute yourself afterwards. If you see something come up on the screen that says the host has muted you, again, that's just to keep the background noise to a minimum. One other thing I would request, this just helps us for attendance purposes. I'm going to ask everybody to go ahead and look at the very bottom of your screen and look for the little chat bubble. Click on the chat, open up your chat box, and go ahead and type in your first and last name for me. That just helps us as far as attendance is concerned. I'm also going to ask that you do that when you come back from break, which will be about the halfway point of today's class. That, again, that helps us as far as attendance purposes. I guess I should probably share my screen while we're waiting here, Bob, because there you go. Thank you to those who are putting your name into the chat. If by some chance you're in a noisy environment, or maybe you're just uncomfortable asking questions via the microphone, Bob will be keeping track of the chat. So if there's any questions that you have, you can type them in there if you're not comfortable doing that over the microphone. So just hop in chat, ask the question, and Bob will get it to me as soon as he sees it, or as soon as he possibly can if I'm in the middle of talking about something specific. One other thing before we get started, if you run into technical issues, the best way to let us know issues is via the chat function. Just hop in there. We'll do the best we can to help you figure out what that problem is. The reality is, the majority of the time, the easiest way to fix it, believe it or not, is to log out of the room and come back into the room, and that usually fixes most things. You may have also noticed when you came into the room that you got a notification that today's class is being live streamed. Rhode Island Builders Association has its own private YouTube channel. We use that YouTube channel for replays. So what'll happen is, a little bit later on today, you will receive a link that will allow you to go back for 1 week, 7 days, and listen to what was presented today's class. Kind of give you a chance to go back and revisit in case there's something uh, you want to go back and look at and remind yourself or refresh your memory of. Just a quick reminder, it is only available for that 7 days. It's not something you can download and keep. Um, so if you do want to go back and revisit it, please make sure that you do that within the first 7 days. Oh, getting to be a bigger class than we originally anticipated, Bob. This is good. I like this.
Yeah, yeah, good number of folks here. So
So
excellent.
people can, so I'm gonna use the one pun of the day, and you guys are gonna get to hear me drone on about drones for a while. So gotta say it once. I got a guy shaking his head right now. I love it.
If you didn't say, I would.
I know you would have. All right. So as I mentioned a little while ago, my name is Bill Parmentier. Uh, Part of my job with Rhode Island Builders Association is to kind of run the behind the scenes on these classes. But what a lot of people don't know is I'm also a professional photographer, videographer, and Part 107 drone pilot. So I have been FAA certified to fly drones since 2016. So I've been flying for a while. Uh, I'm pretty familiar with the majority of what can be done with in the construction industry with drones, and I also love to do it myself. Bob's actually gotten a few moments to see me fly, and he was in awe. It's always fun to see somebody see a drone in person for the first time. There's a lot of negative around drones nowadays. I guess that's the best word I want to use. There's a lot of myths as far as what people think drones do and cannot do. And as I say that, I'm gonna start off the class with that very thought. Maybe if I can get it to go. There we go. I'm going to talk about the top 10 drone myths before we get started into what you can do with drones, the types of drones, etc. These are the ones that kind of hit most people. Number 10 is my favorite because I'm always a little bit confused when people say they want to do number 10, but let's start from the beginning. So the first myth is drones are just toys. Because we see them nowadays. You can buy them in Best Buy, Walmart, just about anywhere. And yeah, there are toy drones, but not all drones are toys. Consumer drones are designed for fun. And when I say consumer drones, those are the little tiny ones that you pay probably $200 or less for. But drones are really highly sophisticated tools. They're used for construction, filmmaking, real estate, agriculture, search and rescue nowadays. And some of the other ones can do mapping, surveying, and all kinds of thermal imaging. There's so much that drones can do. They're not just toys anymore. So just keep that in mind. Myth number two, you can fly a drone anywhere. This one, I hear this quite often. It's like, well, I'm just going to go, as a business person, I'm going to use this drone and I'm just going to, I'll just buy one and use it and I'll ask for forgiveness later. The reality is drone pilots have to follow regulations set by the FAA in the US. In other countries, they also have similar type of restrictions. You can't just fly over any place. For instance, Rhode Island being a small state, I've had numerous times where I've had people wanting me to fly drones in the Warwick area. While it can be done, there's a lot of stuff that has to be worked out in the background to get permissions, and even then, it's not guaranteed. So, for instance, drones can't be flown within 5 miles of any airport, heliport, etc. So when you start thinking about the fact that some of the hospitals in the area have their own heliport, you have the small, tiny airports like North Central, say, and here in the Lincoln area. Those are areas that are very much you cannot fly near. Same thing with military bases, stadiums during games, etc. So you need to have specific permissions ahead of time if you're going to do that. Myth number three, drones are completely autonomous. Everybody thinks nowadays you can just throw a drone up in the air and away it goes, and it'll just do whatever it wants to do. And the reality is, or you want it to, I should say. The reality is, yes, to an extent, they are becoming more autonomous, but at the end of the day, it still needs a human operator to make sure there's nothing that's going to go wrong on the flight. And in some cases, two human operators. You'll have one person who is flying while the other person is what they call a visual observer. So full autonomy is still limited. You hear stories about places like Amazon and other types of businesses that are looking into the autonomous drones where they just set a coordinate in and it goes and drops off the product and then flies away. It's working, but it's still very highly in its early phases at this point. So the reality is it's still they're not exactly autonomous yet. This one is another fun one. I love this one. Drones are for spying, are only for spying. I cannot tell you the number of times I've heard people say to me, "Oh my gosh, I hate drones because they can spy on what I'm doing and so on and so forth." And the reality is, most drones cannot do that, or not without a major issue to try to do so. I've had people during the course of flying a drone for, like, say, a real estate or a construction shoot that'll come out and go, "Oh, you're spying on me. You're looking in my window." The reality is, I would have to fly my drone about a foot from the window in order to actually see in the window, unless it was at night with lights on. Um, these the majority of the drones that are out there right now have very wide angle lenses. In order to be able to see through something like that, you'd have to get relatively close to be able to do it. And at that point, you'd hear the noise because they're not quiet. I mean, drones have become much more quiet, but they're still not a quiet item. So if I had a drone flying a foot away from one of your windows, you'd know it. And reality is it doesn't really happen. It's not one of those things that ever really happens. Drone laws don't apply to me if I'm just a hobbyist. I love this one. I've had a lot of people that say to me, "Well, I just get a drone because I can fly around and play with it and whatnot." And well, yeah, there's a little bit of truth to that. There are still guidelines that you have to follow, even if you're just flying for fun. As a matter of fact, the FAA just started last year. You have to do this. You have to get what's called a trust certificate. It's literally 20 minutes online watching a video and then answering a couple of questions, even for just recreational use. The reason for that is they want you to know the basics. Like, there's certain things, for example, about having to register a drone as a recreational drone. Also, the fact that you need to know that you can't fly over 400 feet up in the air. You can't fly any airports, things like that. These are all things that um, even the recreational pilots need to know. Now, you're going to hear me say, I should probably back up for a second. You're going to hear me say throughout this class the word Part 107 certification or Part 107 licensing. That's the license that the FAA gives to somebody who is a commercial drone pilot. So when I say Part 107, just realize that's for commercial use. If I'm saying recreational use, which we're not going to talk too much about that here, that would be under the trust certificate. Myth number six, the bigger drones are, the harder they are to fly. The reality is it's actually just the opposite of what you'd think. The smaller drones are actually harder to fly than the larger ones because larger ones tend to be more stable, especially when you got a windy type of condition. Uh, they tend to hold up a lot better in high winds or inclement weather. Now, let me also back up and say you really can't do too much flying if it's super windy or if it's raining or snowing, etc. These are not weatherproof drones for the most part, and they don't handle well in really bad weather. Drones can fly for hours on a single charge. Nope, not even true. Even some of the biggest drones only get about a 45-minute flight time. You know, This was seen a lot in the news recently. I don't know if any of you heard the whole thing that was going on end of last year, early part of this year with New Jersey seeing all these drone sightings and whatnot. And these drones are staying up in the air for hours and hours and hours. The reality is, a lot of times it was things such as helicopters and whatnot, because the reality is these drones cannot stay up in the air for hours on end. 20 minutes to 45 minutes on the long side is about all you're going to get. Some of the larger drones that they use for like cinematography and filmmaking might go a little bit better, but it's still nowhere near a couple hours. Drones don't need maintenance. Yes, they do. It's like any other piece of equipment. You should be maintaining your tools. You need to check the batteries, the propellers, firmware, which is the computer system inside of it. All that stuff needs to be done on a regular basis. Two more myths, and then we'll get into a little bit further. Myth number 9, you don't need training to fly a drone. Oh my gosh, that's probably the biggest myth out of them all. The truth is, yes and no. Uh, Drones are relatively easy to fly just to play around with if you're just flying around and whatnot. The trick behind learning how to fly a drone properly takes a lot of practice and a lot of time, especially if you're doing video work with drones. When you first start flying a drone, it's very choppy. You're bouncing all over the place because you're trying to get used to how to fly it, and so on and so forth. And the reality is, it's almost impossible when you first start to get good quality video and even photographs in some cases, because it does take a lot of practice to be able to fly properly. It's getting better. Back in 19, well, 19, all right, Bob, that's good. 2015, when I first started, 16, when I first started flying, it was a lot harder to fly drones. They've gotten a lot easier to fly from a computer standpoint and what the drone itself does, but it's still not something that's just you pick it up and fly, and I'm going to get great photos and great videos. This is my favorite question at all, and it comes up all the time, believe it or not. I have a lot of people that will say to me, "Oh, if somebody was flying a drone over my house, I would shoot it down." Well, here's a couple things you need to keep in mind as far as doing that. One, it's highly illegal in most states. I actually just heard the other day, I think Texas is trying to pass a law to make it legal to shoot down drones, which I think is ridiculous. But um, the reality is the overwhelming majority of the time, if you fire a gun at a rifle, a shotgun, whatever, at a drone, first of all, you'd have to be one heck of a shot to take it out of the sky. Second of all, you'd be looking at fines, jail time. The reality is that the FAA, once a drone is shot down, especially if it's a commercial drone, like if I'm flying it under commercial use and somebody shot it down, the FAA and the NTSB will come down and actually investigate it, find out what the problem, what caused the downing of the drone, and they'll go big fines as well as likely jail time if you're shooting a drone down. So please keep that in mind. It's not a smart thing. And the reality is drones don't spy as much as you think you were. Going back to, I think it was number 3. They're not spying on you. Uh, Now, another common myth that ties into this one is a lot of people go, well, if I'm in my backyard, I have privacy and you can't be flying over me. No, the reality is when you're outside of your home, there's no expectation of privacy. And the reality is you don't actually own the airspace over your home. So once you get, I forget exactly what the number is. It's either 4 or 10 feet above the top of your house. Once you get above that, the highest point of your house, the FAA actually owns that airspace, believe it or not. So the reality is there's no expectation of privacy. Now, if they were trying to fly the drone into your house, it's a different story. But the reality is if you're outdoors, there's no expectation of privacy from that. And so now that I've dispelled a few myths, let's go into why drones matter in construction, because obviously that's probably the biggest reason why most of you have joined us here this morning. You wanted to know, oh, how does it work for using it in construction? There's a number of things, so I'll get through those, and then we'll talk a little bit about the next steps in the process. So first thing, why it matters. Drones are used now for aerial site surveys and site planning. Uh, we're able to now do 3D mapping, high resolution aerial imagery. Um, this helps with developers, architects, engineers, so they can actually analyze the land conditions before they actually break ground on a home or a series of homes. This happens. This also works in commercial settings, but because we're talking residential construction, it's still used. You can use this to figure out the topography of the property so that way you know what you're doing. And when I say 3D mapping, some of the software that these computers use um, can actually show you the grade of the level all the way through from one part of the property all the way to the next. Was there a question that just popped in, Bob? I don't know if I saw it or not. Huh, I guess I missed it. All right, I thought there was a question. Sorry. Um, so anyway,
Bill, what if you have a tree more than 10 feet higher than your house? Is that trespassing into FAA airspace?
great question. It's kind of one of those weird things. If you're flying a drone recreationally, um, most times not going to bother you. If you're talking from a standpoint, if you're above 10 feet with like a ladder or something like that, you're not trespassing. There's no rule saying you can't be there. It's just the rules more apply to drones themselves as far as, how high I can fly, where I can fly, etc. So when I say you don't own the airspace, it's not that you can't have no, you put a flagpole up. You happen to put up a tall flagpole. Nobody's going to say anything to you about that. But for the purposes of flying a drone, you don't actually own the air above your house, is what I'm getting at. So if you're building something, now, obviously, I know there was a thing a few years ago. There's an auto dealership not too far down the road from me that had a huge huge flagpole that they put up with this um, incredibly large flag that was on it. They had to get permits and stuff like that to be able to put that flagpole up. So obviously, if you're going to a certain height, you're gonna need permits and the such. But for the reality is, um, you're not really trespassing unless you're doing something really stupid. So you should be okay on that. So anyway, back to what I was saying here. So that the first thing you can use drones for is aerial surveys and site planning. Second thing is improved project monitoring and documentation. Now, this is going to be more useful for those of you who are home builders, but that's not to say that you can't use it for monitoring, putting a deck on a building, an addition, etc. So with drones, you can actually work with, if you're a larger group, you can actually have progress photos and videos. Now, you'll learn a little bit later on in today's class that those progress photos and videos can be used twofold. One, to pass on to the architect or the engineer to see what's going on, but it can also be used from the standpoint of marketing. So you can actually show people how you do what you do. Uh, but basically, it's a lot easier. It's an easier way of getting information to all the owners of the project, so they don't have to constantly be at the site to see what's going on. You can do the monitoring and the documentation through use of drones. Enhanced safety and risk reduction. This primarily falls into the case of people that are doing things such as siding multifamily homes or roofing type of jobs in the commercial residential commercial sphere. So basically, what this does is it allows you to avoid having to have people up on the roof of a building to do an inspection, or hang on the side of the house to off the side of the house to inspect the siding. You can do that a lot easier with a drone, and you don't have to have workers putting up scaffolding or ladders or heavy equipment to get there. A drone can go up and in 10 minutes get what you need and come back down before you could even set up a single ladder. And of course, it also protects people that are not on the roof from falling off the roof. This works very, very well in the roofing industry for inspection standpoints. It also works well for those of you who may be in the energy sector who are looking to show people how heat is escaping their house. And we'll talk about that a little later too. But again, uh, enhanced safety and risk reduction, not having to put people up on higher areas where they can fall and get injured. Cost savings. Um, Again, if you're using traditional methods of inspection and progress, you're using cameras and pen and paper or whatever the case may be. Again, that's putting people up on buildings, having them put up ladders and scaffolding or cherry pickers, etc. With using a drone, you don't have to have all that stuff until the actual project starts. or you don't have to set it up in areas that you don't need it just to be able to go and do an inspection. You can throw the drone up and take care of it. It also helps with early detection of errors with the imagery from drone. So, if you're doing a big job that's going to take you months, you may have a drone come out once a week where you can check the progress, and that'll allow you to see something that you may not necessarily see from the ground level. And then, of course, marketing for and client engagement. I love people to think about everything you're doing with drones or with your projects from a standpoint of marketing, because all of this can be used for marketing. You can show things such as in this photo above here, what the area looks like. In this case, it's a cul-de-sac, and you can see that it's a fairly quiet neighborhood. I've had people hire me to show how close a home is to the school system or local amenities. Those things are all selling points when it comes to selling a new home. Prospective buyers get to see a better sense of what the surroundings and what it looks like without actually having to go there. In some cases, you may have somebody from out of town that wants to see something that's going on. Again, drone imagery is going to help, but it can also help for doing things for your website, social media, and promotional videos. You can make some really amazing videos, and I'll show some examples of that a little bit later, but you can see some amazing videos for social media and websites with the drone. Faster communication and decision making. Again, if you're dealing with an architect or a engineering company that may not necessarily be in this state or may not be on the site as often as you'd like, drones can provide real-time data and get that off to the engineers and the architects to make sure everything's up to date and knows what's going on. Again, that goes back to making sure there's no mistakes. This also helps to streamline decision making. You don't have to wait till the architect comes down or the engineer comes down to the site to make a decision. They'll be able to look at a photo or a video and go, okay, we can do this from here without having to actually be on site. Now, this doesn't take place of them ever being on site, but it does help to curtail that a little bit and allow that everybody is informed. And the final one, which is a thing that a lot of people don't think about as much, is environmental and regulatory compliance. Everybody's worrying about stormwater and wetlands and whatnot. You can actually use a drone to track what's going on during the project. So you can show, hey, we're following environmental regulations. This is how we're putting erosion control measures in, or if we're removing trees or stormwater runoff. These are things that you can track and keep photos and videos of should anything come down where they ask you, hey, what were you doing to mitigate this problem or that problem? So again, documentation is highly important, and drones are a really easy way to get that documentation. All right, let's talk about what you can do from a business standpoint with drones. I'm going to go through, let me just take a look real quick here. See where we're at time-wise. Okay, I have a bunch of videos here, like 4 or 5 videos, and I think I'm going to have to stop my share for a second. So everybody just bear with me for a second, because I realized I forgot to share the audio, so I need to do this one more time. And the video. Okay, we do have it. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is going to be drone fly-throughs. This is really good for real estate, but it also works well for those of you who are building new home construction. This is relatively new as far as what drones are being used for in the commercial realm. Up until probably the last year or two, drones were not small enough or safe enough to fly indoors. I'm going to show this video. It's about 1.5 minutes, I think, 2-minute video, and it'll show you what can be done with a drone going into buildings and coming out of them. So let's see if we can get this to play. That video is a little bit longer than I had originally remembered. But it gives you a basic idea. I'm not going to limit you all watch through 5 minutes of it flying through a home. But the reality is it can be used interior, exterior, in and out. Now, I will say this, those type of drones take a lot of skill and a lot of practice to fly with. Uh, for those of you who may be familiar with virtual reality headsets, the drones that they use for flying interior now actually work on a headset that you wear, and you're actually flying through like a 3D atmosphere where it's all via that headset. Again, it takes a lot of practice. I have one of those drones. I haven't even gotten to the point yet where I feel comfortable doing interior fly-throughs yet because it's very, very complicated. And as you can imagine, it can be also dangerous. So you got to be really careful about the use of them. But I mention it just to say that there are things that can be done that are kind of out of the ordinary, which will also help with marketing your business. Next one is time lapse. Now, this one I know is a shorter video. Let me show you just what a time lapse video can look like with your drone. Oops, what happened? Went backwards there. As you can see, that fairly short video, but it's definitely a good way to kind of show the progress of a construction progress process. Now, obviously, you're not going to do this on a very small home because it's not going to be cost effective. But if you're doing, large multi-million dollar homes, this is definitely something you may want to think about. People like to see how things are done and how things are made. And again, you can also see aspects of that go back to documentation purposes, so you can see the whole process from start to end. And hopefully that will help at some point with any errors that may come up, catching those ahead of time before they become bigger errors. So time lapse is definitely a good way to do that. Let me get to the next. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is thermal drones. Now, I didn't really talk too much about that earlier, but and I will go on to in a little bit about what thermal drones can do. But bear in mind that you can actually do thermal imaging that will help from an energy standpoint. Also helps you to recognize other issues that may come up in existing buildings. This again is probably primarily more towards people who are in the siding, energy, and roofing areas, but it's just something to watch here. So let's get this video here.
Hey guys, this is Mike from AIT. I'm just doing a recap of a home inspection we did last year and we posted it on YouTube. Just wanted to clear it up a little bit. So we fly in like this. We actually have a zoom camera. So we're zooming in on the house. We're checking the roof vents, the caps, the chimney especially, and the windows. Any of the black and white pictures are what you're seeing from our FLIR View Pro 640 or our FLIR Zemus XT, one of our custom units. The black and white shows up really clear. Black is going to be heat escaping from the house. So those tend to be the brightest, especially on a cool day. So you can see right along the roof cap there, there's heat escaping between several areas. And then as we back away, you're going to see a huge swath that is all heat escaping. And that's where they did not insulate the second floor, we found out. We actually went up there and checked the crawl space and some other stuff for them, just because we wanted to see for ourselves what it was, why such a big area was. It was supposed to be a new roof and some new construction upstairs. This one wall was forgotten. So And at the end there, you see a little clip. We found a few other little spots where animals had dug holes or whatever. And then these are just some cool videos and clips we give to the customer just so they have some nice property photos. So if you like it, share it, and have a good day.
So as you can see, heat sensing drones can actually help find out things like where the heat's escaping your home. The next video I'll show on roof inspections actually can show where there's water damage too. So these drones can actually have a camera that's called a FLIR camera. You probably heard it mentioned. FLIR is just basically a type of, I don't know the whole makeup of how it works, but basically it picks up heat signatures. FLIR cameras are more and more common on drones nowadays. They're used for what we're talking about here, as far as noticing where heat is escaping, finding water damage, etc. But they're also used for things like search and rescue and other really interesting things nowadays. So the next one I'm going to talk about is going to be roof inspections, and there's going to be a short video that actually shows the thermal imaging itself again. From a standpoint of what it can do. This is a video by a national group that does drone work for primarily from a thermographic imaging standpoint. So let's get this going.
Roof inspections have historically required observation either at the ground level, from a ladder, or from physically walking the roof. These observations not only involve steep angles, but also expansive and even inaccessible areas. The amount of time required for these antiquated methods is costly, not to mention the liability risks. Because of these time requirements and physical restrictions, observing every inch of roofs is extremely unlikely, and the quality of these inspections is highly limited. However, when utilizing a drone to capture high-quality photos and videos, not only of the roof, but of the entire structure and property, these inspections can be performed within just a few hours. This allows us to observe the results of the inspection from the ground and prepare a detailed analysis of the data in less time and with virtually no risk of injury. Another amazing advantage of drone technology is the use of thermographic imaging, which is used to detect water infiltration in both roofs and facades. Piloting a drone equipped with the thermal camera allows us to detect otherwise unobservable areas of water damage, which is a culprit of leaks, mold, and rot. Previously, the primary method for detecting water damage required costly and inefficient guess and check methods, sometimes requiring the removal of the building's exterior in order to get an accurate assessment. Utilizing aerial thermal technology, we can determine exactly which areas of a roof contain water with a quick flyover. Drone inspections are accomplished through piloting a drone equipped with a high-resolution camera into the air and capturing images which are compiled into detailed aerial maps of the inspection subject. This method is common with large buildings and properties with multiple buildings. The result is an incredibly detailed model of the property and its structures, which clearly reveals the condition of each roof and can be used to create accurate plans for repair and replacement. Drones can also fly extremely close to structures, making the inspection of roofs with complicated designs in hard-to-reach areas, such as skylights, much more efficient and accurate. To learn more about how we are using drone technology to save our clients time and money while increasing the quality of our work, contact us today and visit us at abjdrones.com.
So pretty interesting stuff that they're doing out there as far as using thermal imaging to find things from heat escaping to, as I mentioned earlier, and they mentioned in the video, finding water damage spots, which is really, I didn't realize when I first started looking into thermal imaging that they could actually use it to find water leaks, which is really cool. Now, I will say this, the drones that do this are a little bit on the pricey side. So unless you're somebody that is doing inspections of that type consistently and on a consistent basis, you may not want to consider this, but just bear in mind that it can be done. Now, they also mentioned a minute ago taking high resolution images. One other thing that can be done with drones is called photogrammetry. I can never say it right, but I'm going to try to get this as best as possible. I'm going to pull up. I'm going to stop my share for a second just because I want to show you what it actually looks like. This is an image that was done with photogrammetry. And hang on. 1 second to move things around on my screen so we can actually get this to show. What happens is, what photogrammetry is it basically you're taking the drone and you're taking a series of pictures, lots of pictures, and then you put them into software and it makes a 3D mock-up model like you see here. And you can actually spin it and see the mock-up. Now, in some versions of this, you can actually even zoom in and get closer looks. But you can see how you can actually get a good understanding of the topography of the area. You can see very detailed imagery of the entire shoot, of the entire area. This can be helpful from an engineering standpoint as well as from an architectural standpoint. If it's a lot that doesn't have a building on it, you can still get pictures of the actual land itself, so you can see where it raises and lowers the grade, I guess I should say, of the property. You can also see any trees, etc., that could be in the way. So this is a good way to get a start on a project. Now, this can also be used as a marketing piece because people love to play around with this. Every time I've ever showed anybody one of these mock-ups on a phone or whatnot, they sit there for 10 minutes spinning it around and saying, well, what can I see? If I flip it this way, I can see the top view. If I spin it around, I can see the backyard. It's really kind of cool when you can put all this into play. And this is something that can be done multiple times during a project also. So maybe you're going to do it at the very beginning when the land is getting graded, and then once the framing is up, you want to do it again, and maybe after that you do it when it's completed. These are great marketing materials, but they're also a great way to document the entire project. Should there ever be a case that you need to go back and either defend yourself because somebody said, A, it wasn't this way, or B, you can say, hey, look, this is something we ran into, and we can see this based off of the photogrammetry images. So definitely a cool thing to play around with. And outside of the drone and the licensing and whatnot, there's a subscription fee to do this type of imagery, but it's still something that can be done. And I'll go through costs and stuff like that after we take a break in a little bit. Let me get back to my presentation. Give me a second here. 2 desktops, and I got to fly around and figure out where things are. So there we go. All right, I think we're back to the main screen now. Okay, yeah. Here's a cool one. I was telling Bob about this one this morning. This is something that is very, very new. This may help for some of you who do power washing and window siding and window washing, etc. They now have drones that will do window cleaning, believe it or not, which is kind of a wild setup. I'll play this quick video. It's like less than a minute long that shows what these drones can do from a washing standpoint. The audio is not working well, but we'll just cut that off. But you can see that it sprays on this and it just flies up alongside the building, sprays the windows down, and they can do large buildings so they don't have to put scaffolding up or any type of hanging basket. They can just do it with the actual unit. These are also being used now, believe it or not, for firefighting too. It's amazing what they can do. And it's kind of interesting to see the technology as it's advancing over time. I can see a day coming where they'll actually use these drones for lifting heavy materials onto roofs, etc., saving possible energy and injury for people carrying stuff like shingles, etc., up onto a rubber roofing up to the top of the roof instead of having to hire a crane or something along that line to get it up there. Now you'll eventually be able to use a high-end drone that can just lift that sucker up and put it up on the roof for you. All right, having said that, I think we've hit a good point. I know I'm a little bit ahead of the game compared to where I thought it was going to be. Why don't we take a 15-minute break? When we come back from break, I'm going to talk about the drones themselves, as far as, different styles of drones and what you would use them for, as well as the rules and regulations that you're going to need to follow if you decide you want to do this for yourself. So why don't I have 8:46. Let's say we'll get everybody back here for 9 o'clock. Does that work?
Yep. Sounds good, Bill.
All right, we'll see everybody at 9 o'clock. Okay, if we want to start working our way back to our seats, I'll give a minute or so for anybody to kind of get back and settle in. And I think Mr. Salvis should be back shortly also.
I'm here.
I can't see. I don't know. You get your camera off. I can't see anything. Just so you guys know, we only got about 20 minutes, half an hour worth of information left, then we'll open up some questions. We'll get people done a little bit earlier today. But before we go on, before we get started back up, if there's any questions about anything I've talked about already, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. You can feel free to unmute yourself. Just click on the microphone icon and unmute yourself. And I'm more than happy to answer whatever questions you have. If you don't have any, I'll give another 30 seconds for anybody to get back to their seats and we'll get started. All right. I guess we can get started. Looks like we got pretty much everybody back. So now we've talked about all the things that can be done with drones. Now you need to figure out if you're going to be doing these yourself, we need to talk about drones themselves as far as what's the right drone for the right project, because not all drones are created equal. Certain drones are good for certain things. Other drones are good, are better for, are good for other things, different things. So let's go over. Not this is not going to be an exhaustive list, but we're going to go over a few of the different options that are out there, as well as give you an idea of what the pricing is like on those. So first drone, as we mentioned, the very first thing I showed you the video earlier was of the fly-through of that home. And this was a style drone that was used during that video, which is called the DJI Avata 2. Now, DJI is a Chinese-made manufacturer. They pretty much dominate the industry for the most part as far as drones are concerned. There are some other manufacturers, and I have one on this list that's a non-DJI manufacturer. But the reality is DJI still makes some of the best drones in the industry. Unfortunately, the sad part about that is there's starting to become more and more restrictions on these drones coming out of China for security reasons. And there's every so often, I think last September, November, between September and November, there was a lot of talk about DJI being banned wholly in the United States, which would have put a huge crimp in the drone industry in the United States. So far, it hasn't happened. There has been some issues getting some of them with the new tariffs that are going on, but the reality is they're still the best drones that are out there. So anyway, the Avata 2 drone is a FPV drone, which means first person view. So basically, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner of that photo, that's the goggles that you put on when you're flying this unit. It has a joystick type controller. They also have a traditional controller that looks more like a game controller that can be used for these drones. As I mentioned earlier on, these drones don't have a long flight time. The Avata only has about a 23-minute flight time from the point you take off the ground to the point you have to land it again. And that's in the best conditions. If there's a lot of wind or it's a really cold day, your battery's not going to be as long powered. 337 grams. Anything over 250 grams, which is roughly a half a pound, has to be registered with the FAA. And if you're using it commercially, it doesn't really matter the weight on it. But if you're using it for recreational purposes, anything over 250 grams has to be registered with the FAA. Now, you're also going to see on all of these a range, how far out the drone can fly. And then you're also going to find out from me in a little bit about how far you can actually fly. This drone has about an 8-mile range from the controller and the headset. Unfortunate part is by federal law, you're supposed to fly what they call VLOS, which is visual line of sight. So you can only technically fly as far as you can actually see the drone in the sky with your naked eye. That's not using binoculars or anything else. You need to be able to see it with your naked eye. If you cannot, you're in violation of flying that drone. Now, that's not to say that you can't get special waivers to fly out of visual line of sight, but just bear in mind that the average user is not going to fly that 8 miles out. And the reality is you can fly 8 miles out. They've done these tests. When they say they have an 8 mile range, you may be able to fly miles out with the drone, but you're not going to have enough battery power to come back anyway, because given the amount of actual flight time you have. This is the fastest drone out on the market right now for non-racing drones. This thing hits a top speed of 60 miles an hour, which is crazy, and it's not you'd never fly it at 60 miles an hour for commercial use. That's just crazy. Now, what do you the cost on this one? It starts at about $1,000. If you stop buying the extra batteries and whatnot, it's going to run you between $1,000 and $1,500 just to get the drone itself. And bear in mind, that's not also including damage protection. You can pay a couple $100 here and there to protect it should you crash it into a tree or whatnot. DJI does offer a protection program that will allow you to get a replacement at a lower cost if you pay an upfront fee on it, like a warranty program. But the starting price is $999. Now, as far as drones go, the Avata 2 is probably got the least features for what you would possibly want to use for commercial use. Great for interior, exterior video, and traditional photography. That's about it, what you can do with that. But it also gives you that added ability of flying indoors because it's a small enough drone. Now, I don't know if you can see me on the video, but the drone is literally a little bit bigger than the size of my hand. So it's not a very big drone, to give you an idea of size. That's why it's a little bit safer to fly indoors. It also has built-in propeller guards. You see here that there's those round circles that are around the props. That protects, should it hit something, from being damaged. It also protects from injury for the most part. So if somebody were to hit you with that drone, excuse me, while it would hurt, it's not going to cut you up because of the fact that it's got the propeller guards built into it. The next one, and this is the one Bob's familiar with because he's actually been out with me when I've had this drone out with me. This is the DJI Mini 3 Pro. Now, this has a whole new set of things you can use it for. Longer flight time, as you can see, you get about 38 minutes on a battery. If you're flying this recreationally, again, this is just more for informational purposes. This does qualify to not have to be registered with the FAA because it hits under that 250-gram weight. If you're just playing around for fun, you still need to get that trust certificate that I talked about before for recreationally, but you don't have to register it with the FAA. Now, I will give you one caveat on that. They make, for this unit, they make an extended life battery, which means it's got about a 45-minute life cycle on it that you can buy. Unfortunately, it's a heavier battery, so it brings you over that 250 grams if you put that battery into place, and then you're going to have to register it. So it's kind of a trade-off. A reminder as far as from what I said earlier, anything over a half a pound or 250 grams has to be registered. That includes payload. So if you're putting something on top of it, like an extra GoPro camera, or you're trying to lift up a small item or something like that, that's going to bring you over that weight. You need to be registered commercially at that point. This one only has a top speed of 35 miles per hour. Again, speed is not really a major thing for you if you're using it commercially, but that's about how fast you can get to a area that you want to photograph or video. Again, misnomer, 11.1 mile range on this drone. Even though they say 11-mile range on this drone, I don't even know that you'd have enough battery power to get out that far. So I don't know how they do the testing to say that this is 11 miles. And then the reality is if you fly it out 11 miles, you've just lost the drone because now you're going to have to drive 11 miles to find it because you're not going to get back with the battery, even if you could do it. Now, this is one of the least expensive drones out of all the drones I'm going to talk about. It starts at $549. That's with the basic controller that you see here. They do make a controller that has a built-in video screen so you can see what the drone is seeing. That runs about $200 extra, so it's going to run around $749, and that's without any extra batteries. What are these good for? Remember the photogrammetry I showed you a little while ago, the 3D image? This is a great drone for doing that. It's also a great for video, time-lapse, and traditional photography. This has got one of the best cameras for what they call a prosumer drone. This is professional and consumer rated drone. This has for those of you who know anything about megapixels, the average drone has anywhere from a 10 to a 20 megapixel camera. This actually has a 48 megapixel camera on it. So you can get very high resolution photos with this. And if you start doing things like panoramas, you can get really, really high resolution imagery. Drawback to that is it takes up a lot of space on your computer hard drives, but it does give you some really, really cool setups. Now, this is a unit that this next one here is a unit that's been around since 2017, 2018, the Phantom 4 series. Um, this was the workhorse for a long time in the commercial drone industry for surveying, uh, time lapse, photo, video, all of that. It's taken a back seat to some of the newer models now, but it's still a highly sought out unit for commercial use. It has a maximum flight time of about 30 minutes. It weighs 3 pounds, so it's heavier than most drones are. It's only got about a 6 mile range, but again, range doesn't really matter much when you're doing commercial use. Um, Top speed of 45 miles per hour, and the cost is $2,299 to start. Now, I will say you do have a couple of interesting pieces to this that make it the cost a little bit more, but also make it uh, I'd give you the reason as to why the cost is more. The camera on this unit can be changed out to a camera that has removable lenses, so you can actually do different what they call focal lengths. You can do wider angle shots, you can do narrow angle shots, etc. Of course, that adds to the cost of the drone, but just realize that that's going to be give you much higher quality imagery because you can zoom in easier, you can get better specific, more specific to the type of photos and videos you're doing. The other drawback to this unit, though, is it's a larger unit. This is about the size of a, um, I don't know, maybe a toaster oven, something about that size. So it's a decent sized drone, and it doesn't fold up. So most of like the previous drone that I showed you, the Mini 3, that folds up into a compact thing that you can almost put into your pocket. This thing, obviously, the Phantom 4 is not something you're going to fold up. It's something you're going to have to carry in a large case. Did I have a question? I'm sorry, look, Bob, like you might have had something.
I didn't see one.
Oh no, you look like you unmuted. I thought you had something. I looked over. Messing with me. All right. So yeah, the Phantom 4 is great for programmetry, sorry, photogrammetry, video, time lapse, traditional. They're even using this in some cases for land surveys. Not quite as accurate for the land survey piece, but it is definitely something that can be used for that end. Now we get into the big boy. This next one is the unit that's going to be of most interest to people that are in the energy as well as roofing and siding piece of the industry. This unit is called the Mavic 3 Enterprise. It starts at about $4,800. That's the minimum starting point. You start throwing in like thermal imagery onto that, and larger batteries and lighting and whatnot. They have actually searchlights that you can put on this unit. This unit is amazing, but the reality is the more you add on to it, the higher the expense. Weighs a little bit less than the Phantom that you just saw a few minutes ago. This one has one of the longer flight times too, where you got about a 45-minute flight time in perfect weather, no wind, etc. That's why that makes this unit great for doing surveying, because especially if you're doing a large area where you're going to have to do a grid flight pattern, it takes a lot more time to do that. This is also programmable from the standpoint is I can set what they call waypoints. What a waypoint is basically just consider it a digital map, and you actually put these little pinpoints on that digital map that you're going to fly, and it literally tells the drone to go from this point to this point to this point to this point to this point till it finishes the whole setup. So if you actually saw a surveying drone, it looks like a giant zigzag. So it'll go up and back, up and back, up and back until they do the entire property. And that's all done via what they call waypoints. The nice thing about that is also waypoints that are available through this unit can also be used for the documentation I was showing you earlier, where you show where it was breaking ground and then the framing and then all the other aspects of the project where you're doing that long-term time lapse. What you can do is you can actually build a map within this unit, do a fly around of the property when you first start, And then you go back 3 weeks later to do or 2 weeks later to do the next round. You just tell it to do the exact same flight pattern it did previously, so everything falls in line cohesively. Uh, that's a great thing. Back when I first started doing drones, one of my first projects was to um, capture this boathouse being built from ground level all the way to the end of it. And I had to go down once every couple of weeks and do a complete circle around that property, videoing it. And then I had to go back the next week and do the next one and next one. Well, we didn't have waypoints when these drones first came out, so I had to actually write down all my telemetry, they call it. So I was this high, I was this far out from the center of the thing. So every time I'd go back, I had to make sure I was as close as possible to that original map points. Now, the drones can do that without me having to worry about it. I could set it once and forget it. Again, point gets a little bit higher. You're up at $4,800 now as a starting point. That's for one battery. All these prices, I should have said from the beginning, are including one battery. So if you're going to be doing a big project, you're going to have to buy multiple batteries. It's going to cost you more. The average battery runs anywhere from 80 to about $150, depending on the drone. Uh, Thermal imaging. This has a thermal unit, just like I said, showed you in the video, that can detect heat loss as well as water damage. Um, so if you're a roofer or a siding guy, this is a great, or even like I said, in the energy sphere, this is a great unit for being able to do that. I see that as the next big thing for drones is that thermal imaging from a standpoint of energy efficiency, especially as most of you know, we've taken on the new energy code as of November 14th of last year, and the grace period ended on Valentine's Day of this year. So this is going to be something that's going to be very useful for doing energy audits after houses are built or after remodels are done to make sure that heat is not escaping from areas that it should not be escaping from. So that is that one. Now, this next one is the one non-DJI drone that I'm going to talk about. It's called the Parrot Anafi. Um, this one's a small unit, it's a foldable unit. It has most of the same features of the Mavic Enterprise that I just showed you, but higher resolution, a little bit higher quality. That's why your starting point is $7,000 on this drone. It's not an inexpensive drone. It has 4 cameras built into it that do all that stuff together: the thermal, the surveying, the traditional, the time lapse, the videography, and the photogrammetry, as well as traditional still photos. Um, this one here, Anafi's been around for, sorry, Parrot has been around for a while. They are a partially US based company, so we may see the drone industry heading that way with the restrictions on DJI, but for the time being, that's still a little bit of ways off. But just realize that this drone is being used more and more in the thermal fields. It's a high quality thermal. It's used for search and rescue, as well as they're using it for energy related videos and photos at this point. So, and I should have also said, you you saw a video earlier of the thermal imaging. You can do videos as well as still photographs of the thermal imaging. So you could actually print out a photo of where the heat zones are on a home, so you could show that to a potential client and send it digitally. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just via video. So, all right. So that's basically where we're at as far as the types of drones. Now there's hundreds of drones that are out there, so I'm just giving you the a general overview of what's there for drones. You can, if you do a little bit of searching, you can find there's probably 30 or 40 different manufacturers of drones. Some that do the cinematic end drones, like Sony makes cinematic drones that are used for making movies. We're not going to use that in residential construction. You're not going to spend 50 grand for a drone. That's something you need. Now, the one drone I could not find the information on is as far as cost wise, was the window washing drone that I showed at the last video I showed. That one probably runs in the 25 to 30 grand range, not including all the extra stuff. So that would be more for somebody that does commercial style window washing for like skyscrapers and such. Not that it couldn't be used for apartment buildings, but you definitely have to have a good use for that. excuse me, just get a sip of water here. Now we get into the fun part. This is going to be a little bit tedious, and I do apologize, only from the standpoint of knowing what you need to follow as far as the FAA regulations. So there's not going to be a lot of photos here, but I'm just going to explain a lot of what you need to do in order to comply with the FAA if you're going to use drones yourself. So here's just a short list of some of the things you need to think about. As a commercial pilot, flying a drone commercially, you need to get the Part 107 licensing, which I mentioned earlier. Now, getting that licensing is a little bit of a task. If there's a test, that there's no, which I find odd, there's no testing as far as your ability to fly the drone. It's not like you have to go and take a road test or an air test with a drone like you would take a road test on a car. You're not required to do that. They're not worried about how you fly. They're worried about you following the rules when you fly. So Part 107 follows that process. I will say this for those of you who don't like to try to figure out charts and maps and things along that line. It can be a little daunting to take this Part 107 testing. There are programs out there that'll allow you to pre-test and whatnot, but I tell people that the initial test to become Part 107 licensed is not that far off from the test that a recreational Cessna pilot would have to take. You need to understand airspace. You need to understand where the airspace starts, where it finishes, where no-fly zones are, weather. There's a whole litany of things that you need to understand when you go to take your test the first time. There are some courses out there, and I'll mention one of them in a little bit that will help you to pre-plan to taking the test, but just realize you need to do that. Next thing is your drone needs to be commercially registered with the FAA. You have to actually go onto the FAA website, create an account, and you have to register your drone. Now, the cost of registering the drone is fairly cheap, if you ask me. It's only $5 to get a drone registered, and that registration is for 5 years. We're going to move it to 3. I think it's still at 5. But that means if you're flying commercially, you only have to re-register your drone every 3 to 5 years, depending on what that is. If you're a recreational pilot just playing with the drone and not doing anything with it, then it's $5 for a lifetime on the drone. One thing I did not mention earlier, and I probably should have, is the distinction between flying commercially and flying recreationally. It's not exactly what you think it would be. A lot of people think, well, if I'm flying with the drone commercially, I'm flying it to make money. I'm flying it to sell the pictures. I'm flying it to, I'm going to charge inspection costs for flying with that. Or some people will say, well, I'm just going to fly it so I have some advertising materials, marketing materials. So I'm not actually getting paid for it. So I just need it for that purpose. The reality is all of that falls under commercial, even if you're not getting paid for it. FAA uses a term that's called furtherance of business. What does that mean? Anytime you're using a drone to further your business or somebody else's business, it's considered a commercial application. So if you're just going up to inspect a roof and not getting any money for that inspection, it's still considered commercial use. If you're taking photos that you're going to then go to use in your marketing, it's considered commercial use because you're using it to further your business. If you're using it to do measurements or whatever, or thermal imagery, same thing. It's considered furtherance of business. So all of those things fall under commercial use. As a matter of fact, I don't know for any of you that actually watch YouTube and play around on YouTube, even using a drone to capture video that you're going to put onto a social media channel that is making money or marketing yourself, again, falls under the commercial aspect of things. So it's a very wide swath that they hit as far as commercial. So basically, what it comes down to, unless you're just flying around for the fun of it, you have to get yourself registered commercially. Flight restrictions apply when you're flying, as I mentioned a little while ago. When you're a recreational pilot, there's a much more stringent set of rules that you have to follow from the standpoint. There's a lot you can't do as a recreational pilot that you're allowed to do as an FAA Part 107 pilot. But there's still restrictions. You can't fly within 5 miles of an airport or a helipad without what they call a waiver. And the only way you can get a waiver is to be commercially certified or licensed. You can't get any type of waivers as a residential flyer, drone pilot. Max height of 400 feet above the object being captured. That is a requirement. You cannot fly above that. So basically, if you've got a 10-story building that you want to photograph or video, you can fly 400 feet above the top of that building legally. And that as long as you're within a 400-foot radius of that building. So 400 feet wide, 400 feet above the top of it is your constraints as far as doing that. As long as you're below 400 feet from ground level, you can fly wherever you want as long as you're not in a restricted area. But 400 feet above is the rule. The next one is one that I tell people all the time about, and I feel like sometimes it falls on deaf ears, but insurance. FAA does not require you to carry insurance. They don't. So full disclosure, they do not ask for insurance. They don't care about the end of that. That's something that you're responsible for. Now, what I hear from a lot of people, and I hear this a lot in the roofing industry. Well, I just bought the drone to do inspections. I'm just going to fly it up there. I'm not going to get licensed. I'm not going to get insured. I have liability insurance from my company. No problem. I'm going to do that. Well, what you need to understand is general liability insurance does not cover an accident with a drone. So if you have that $500,000 that you're required by the state to have as a contractor, and you put a drone up in the air and you smack it into the side of the house, or you take out a power line, your insurance is going to go, too bad, so sad. Sorry, we're not going to cover you. They don't have to cover you. Matter of fact, it's not all that easy to get drone insurance, quite frankly. It can be a little bit pricey. There are different pieces of software and apps that you can use to do what they call pay-as-you-fly types of setups. But I've gotten quotes from $1,000 to about $2,000 a year for drone insurance. That's for $2 million of coverage, mind you. But and that's more if somebody were using a drone on a consistent basis. In most cases, you're going to be better off with a pay-as-you-go, where you pay anywhere from $16 to $40 per flight hour. Again, going back, needs to be flown within line of sight. Now, commercial pilots have one exception to that line of sight rule. If I am flying a drone around a skyscraper, for instance, a high rise, 20 stories, 30 stories, I am allowed to have that drone go around the back of the building when I cannot see it, as long as I'm continuously moving. I can't go behind a building and sit there and take pictures while I'm not there. I have to do complete the circle or complete the point to coming back to line of sight. Now, the other thing is on the larger projects, you're going to want a visual observer, right, Bob? We have a story. Maybe if we have time at the end, we'll tell the funny story about the line of sight and visual observer thing with me and Bob. But just know that you have to fly line of sight. Now, I mentioned a little while ago about there's a program that you can take to learn how to take the test, get the information on how to take the test. There's 5 or 6 different companies out there. This is one of the ones that's probably the top elite setup for drone courses. And they have a prep course for the Part 107. I believe they charge $175 for the program. It's a lifetime program, so anything changes, you get to keep that and go back through it. Now, what they say is you're going to watch a series of videos. I think there's like 14 or 15 hours worth of videos on their course. And you watch a series of videos. At the end of each video, you take a test. At the end of the program, you take a series of 2 or 3 practice tests. After those practice tests are done, they guarantee that on the first try, you will pass your licensing. If you don't, they'll reimburse you the cost of the program. So you'll get $175 back if you fail. Now, I will say this. One of the unfortunate parts about going for the FAA test, if you fail the FAA test, there's a fee for that too that you have to take. I believe that's also $175. If you fail the actual test that you have to take to become certified, you have to pay for that price again. It's not a case of I pay the $175 and I keep taking the test until I pass it. Each time you fail it, you got to pay all over again. Thankfully, most people don't fail the first time, especially if you go through a program like Pilot Institute. But just know that you really want to prep for that course before you do it. The initial time that you take your Part 107 certification test, you have to go to a site to actually take it. What I mean by a site is you have to go to an airport that offers the flight training and testing. Used to be in Rhode Island, the place that you would go to was North Central Airport in Lincoln. Unfortunately, the company that was there has closed, so they're no longer doing the flight testing, Part 107 flight testing there. I think the closest one, unfortunately, is out in Canton, Massachusetts, to take your initial test. Now, I say initial test because you do have to retest every 2 years to keep your certification. The good news about it is after you've taken the initial test and passed it, you don't have any other fees to pay. Every time you have to redo your licensing, after the first one is an online FAA exam that you take. It's 90 questions, it's open book, and you take it as many times as you want until you pass it, and it's free. So after the first time you get your license, you don't ever have to pay for it after that. So I've renewed now. I'm coming up on my fifth renewal as a pilot. The first two I had to go when I first started flying. The first one was $150, and then my second renewal I had to go again to an offsite for $150 more to take that test for my renewal. But after that, COVID hit, and the FAA said, "Okay, we're now going to make it so the renewal process is easier and free." So, for those of you just starting now, that's a great thing. For me, I still had to pay it initially. But like I said, I highly recommend Pilot Institute. They're a great program if you want to get into getting your Part 107 yourself. Realize that start to finish, it's about 40 hours worth of prep work. And then the day of the test, I think you have 90 minutes to finish. It's either 90 minutes or 2 hours to finish a 90 question test. And I will say this, some of the stuff on the test is stuff you go, why would I even need to know this? Like, for instance, flying, you have to know airspace regulations from 3,000 feet up. Well, you can't fly a drone at 3,000 feet, but you still need to know the information behind it because you need to know that there may be aircraft in that area. So you have to be paying attention for that during the course of it. But anyway, again, long way of saying, I highly suggest if you're going to get your Part 107 to take a class ahead of time. You're not going to want to go running in just on some on the booklet that the FAA has, and you can if you go to FAA.drone.zone, I think it's called. Just do a search on FAA Drone Zone. You can actually pull down a booklet that will help you to prepare for the test. But I can tell you, it's woefully missing a lot of the information that you need for the test. So reality is, you would be in a better place to try to take the test online, take some online classes, and then go from there. All right, let's talk about cost. Now, I mentioned a little while ago that the cost of the drones. Well, the online training is something you need to take into consideration. Online training goes from anywhere from $175 for the training up to about 300 plus for the training. That higher end is for more specialized stuff. You can actually get your Part 107 training, but you can also get classes on how to survey properly with drones, how to use thermal imaging with drones. As a matter of fact, Pilot Institute offers some of those classes too as add-ons to the Part 107 class that they do have. Drone registration, as I mentioned, $5 per drone. If you have multiple drones, then obviously it's $5 for each one. On average, 3 to 5 years is how often you have to renew that registration. I'm pretty sure it's 5, but at one point they were talking about making it 3. Part 107 license itself is $175 to take the test, as I mentioned a little while ago. That includes going to the facility, taking the test. They also do a TSA background check on you at the same time on that initial one to make sure you're not, I guess, not a terrorist. I can only assume that's the reasoning behind it, but they do have to do a background check before you get your Part 107. Drone, as you saw a little while ago, $600 is about the starting point. $15,000 plus is some of these drones if you're getting into the high-end drones. I'm going to say most of you in residential construction are going to fall in that $1,000 to $2,000 range for the cost of the drone. So give you an idea what you're looking at. And this is another cost that most people don't think too much about, and it's actually the cost of the time it takes you to do this. Obviously, you need like I said, about 40 hours of time to prep for the test. I can tell you before I started flying a drone commercially, I probably put 40 to 50 hours worth of training time flying the drone on top of that. So you're looking at a minimum of 80 to 100 hours worth of work before you want to go and say, I'm going to use this drone commercially. You want to be able to make sure that you can fly the drone properly. Um, One of the big things, and I often repeat this one, is people think that they can just buy a drone and fly it up in the air. And yeah, they can probably get it to fly where they want it to. But when you're first learning how to fly a drone, it's very choppy. You're not doing smooth actions as far as making a smooth radius, or you're bouncing up and down, or turning quickly side to side. And then video, that'll make people nauseous trying to watch a video of you spinning around in circles. So you don't really want to do that. You want to get that practice time in to be able to fly slowly and at the speed that will make the best video. When it comes to photography, uh, the other thing you need to think about is composition, how you compose the shot, also lighting. If one side of the building may get sun at a certain part of the day, if you're trying to get a marketing image of a building, a house that you just built, and you're pointing that drone camera into the sun, it's not going to be a very good photo because it's going to get blown out. It's going to look weird. It's just not going to be a good quality one. So you're going to have to know the best time of day to go down and do the photos and how to compose it so that it looks the best. Because obviously if you're using marketing materials, you're probably not taking a picture of the back side of the house. You're taking a picture of the front side. So you need to know when the lighting is going to be best for that. So that's all things that come under that practice piece that you need to really understand ahead of time before you start doing this commercially. So that's an overview of what you're looking at cost wise. And again, if you're one of those people that chases technology, you may be spending, that drone cost every 3 to 5 years. On average, I probably replace my drone every 3 years. So something to keep in mind as far as the cost of it. Okay, let's talk about integrating your drones into your workflow. What do I mean by workflow? Well, I teach a class for Rhode Island Builders Association on how to take traditional photography and videography uh, for residential contractors. And one of the most important parts of doing any type of visuals for your business is planning it out ahead of time. Because here's the reality of things. We're all busy. You've got projects that you're working on, and you're putting a deck on the back of the house. You have timelines as far as when everything's going to happen. If you don't add doing your visuals as part of that timeline, you're going to forget about it. I promise you. What's going to happen is you're going to say, okay, well, I want to make sure I want drone shots of the framing once it goes out. Well, there's some sort of delay in the framing, and everything takes a little bit longer, and you get real busy because you're trying to juggle 16 balls at once, and you don't have on your list take pictures of that framing. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to get to the point where the house is all closed up and go, oh, I forgot to do that. So include that as part of your workflow. So pre-construction phase, you want to make sure you have that in writing on whatever your timeline you're using as far as the actual project itself. You want to do your site documentation, your surveys. Um, this is going to help with speeding up permitting and zoning applications also, because then you can take those drone imagery, the drone data, and bring that to the permitting and the zoning department and show them that so they don't have to have a traditional survey done in some cases. Now, I can't speak to how the local zoning laws will allow this or not allow it, but in most cases, it can be used. Aerial imagery can be used to help with that permitting and zoning. Next part is during construction phase. Now you need to think about what you want to do during the construction phase. Well, you should be doing weekly flights for tracking your progress, especially if it's a long-term project. If it's a one-day project, obviously it's going to be something, or a two-day project, you may do it a little bit differently. Great thing about doing it during construction, you've got that tracking progress. You can also keep track of subcontractors, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing to spec work based on the aerial images you take. You can also these will also help you to identify delays early and make real-time adjustments. If you're doing a weekly shoot of the area, you may say, oh, this part of the roof was supposed to be put on this week and it didn't get put on. Okay, that's a delay. I need to make an adjustment accordingly. Or you may send something to an engineer or the architect, and they may look at it and go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't see this as part of the original part of the project. Let me fix this now before it becomes a major delay." So again, these are things that you want to think about during construction as to what you would want to use the drone for. Finally, post-construction and inspections. I lump inspections into post-construction. This is going to be more for the guys that are doing roofing and maybe siding and decks. But basically, for post-construction, you want to do final site documentation for your as-built records. Also, you want to use it for marketing materials, reports to your clients and investors, as well as you can use it for inspection. What's the inspection for? Like I said earlier, and I showed earlier. It could be for siding, it could be for the windows, it could be for the energy, it could be the roofing. That fits a whole list of things. But it can also be used for punch list verification. You know, you get a punch list when the project's almost complete. You can verify that those things are done. If there's something that needed to be put on the roof, it's a lot easier to verify that it's been done with a drone as opposed to having somebody come back with a ladder and climb up on the roof and make sure it's done properly. So, and of course, again, I can't stress enough how important this stuff is for marketing yourself. These photos and videos are going to be tremendous marketing materials for you because it's going to give you unique views of the project. And let's be honest, people like to see how things are done. So even the project at midpoint of the project, people like to see what it looks like. What does it look like when it's framed? What does it look like when the walls go up, when the roof goes on, when all of the landscaping gets done? People like to see that. And if you can show that as part of your marketing, it's going to help put you a step up above everybody else that's not doing that. Years ago, to be able to do all of this stuff, you'd have to hire a photographer and a helicopter pilot and do all that, and it got very expensive. A good friend of mine and Bob's used to do helicopter work. Steve Mason, Bob. I remember having a conversation with Steve a few years ago, well, probably about 8 years ago now. He used to
Mhm.
actually do inspections of manufacturing via helicopter, and he had to get all kinds of insurances and all
Oh,
this stuff. And he
I
said
bet that
once
was expensive.
well, that's what he said. He said once drones came about, there was no need for him to do that anymore because it was cost prohibitive. You know,
Right.
he could have a drone go up for $300 or $500 as opposed to, $1,000 for the fuel in the helicopter, another 500 for the pilot, another 500 for himself. You're talking thousands of dollars to do one inspection. So drones have definitely brought the cost down of being able to do these unique views and get you good quality imagery from that standpoint. So to wrap up, that's what you want to look at as your timelines. You want to look at pre-construction, construction itself, and then post-construction. And again, make sure you put this into your timelines because again, at the end of it, you will miss something if you don't have it in there. It's like everything else, you don't put it down. Bob and I both keep paper calendars and paper lists because if we don't, we forget things. And I know a lot of people do that. So really put that in as part of your uh, timeline. All right. I am pretty much done with everything that I have to show today. I want to open it up if there's anybody that has any questions on anything I've talked about all morning. Please feel to unmute yourself or you can wave your hands. I don't know, Bob, did we have anything in the chat?
Nothing in the chat right now. I would certainly encourage anybody who is thinking about either doing their own drone work or hiring somebody to do drone work for their construction business to reach out directly to Bill at Reba and ask him those questions as you move forward because he's been doing this for a while and the last thing you want is to hurt somebody or some
Oh, yeah.
property or get one of these massive FAA fines. It's the
Actually, you know
last
what?
thing you need.
I'm glad you brought that up, Bob. Thank you, because I meant to mention that a little while ago. This is another thing that you want to keep in mind as far as the fines that can happen. I meant to put a slide in there, and I missed that. But that's one thing you really need to be careful with. I talked about insurance as far as drones are concerned. Making sure you have the proper drone insurance. Uh, you can get into a lot of trouble really quickly. And it doesn't necessarily mean even you being the drone pilot. You need to be very careful when you're hiring somebody to do drone work for you and make sure that they have their Part 107. You need to be asking for that. If you're not asking for that, you're putting yourself at risk. I'm going to give you a quick example. Um, There was a bunch of fines that came down from the FAA back in September of last year. They're really starting to crack down on drones. And some of these fines can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some cases they may be only $10 or $20,000. But again, can $10,000 sink your business? If you're a small mom and pop, maybe. Here's the reality of it. One of the fines that went out was against a real estate agent. A real estate agent hired a drone pilot to fly and take photos of a listing for them. Turns out that the drone pilot was not registered with the FAA, was not insured. Nosy neighbor called the FAA and complained that there was a drone flying over their house, right? FAA went and investigated and said, I don't know how they did it. Well, I can tell you how they did it. It's a thing called remote ID. The FAA can see any drone that's in the air nowadays. All the new drones have a transponder in it. But anyway, the FAA found out who was flying that drone. The drone pilot got a $3,000 fine. The real estate agent got an $11,000 fine. The fine is higher for the person that is hiring the drone pilot than it is for the drone pilot. Only exception to that rule is if it's egregious, where the drone pilot has been warned multiple times and then still does it, then the fines get higher and higher. But the reality is, for a first-time fine, the person hiring the drone pilot is going to get fined higher than the person flying the drone. And if by some chance you are one of those roofers, real estate agents, whatever, that flies that drone and is doing it illegally and get caught by the FAA, you double dip. You get double the fines. Lucky you. So really, please do it the right way. If you're not going to go through the process, because it is a lengthy process and it can be a little bit pricey and even from a time standpoint, if you're not going to do it yourself and you're going to hire somebody to do it, make sure that they're insured. Even though they're not required by the FAA, you can still ask them for their insurance, and you ask to see their Part 107. All it is a little card that's the size of a credit card that says FAA Part 107 certified.
Mhm.
Check that. Make sure that's something that you do before you do anything else.
Yep.
Thank you for reminding me, Bob.
And,
'Cause I forgot all about that.
Sure. One of the things that I also want to draw attention to is that Bill mentioned during the course of the presentation how many benefits there are for marketing your business using drone photography and videography. And obviously this is not a pure marketing class, so we couldn't dive into too many of those uses, although he did mention a few. But I would just alert everyone to the fact that both Bill and I will be at a REBA-sponsored event called the Marketing Camp in May in Newport. So if you have desires to grow your business and want some of the best local marketing advice, it's a day and a half, basically conference at the Wyndham in Newport. So anyone that's interested in that, just reach out to me. I'll send you the details. Otherwise, Bill, thank you very much. There's no more questions in the chat, unless anybody has any final questions for us.
Bill, what kind of drone do you fly now?
Great question. I have 3 different drones that I fly. I have that Avata 2 that I showed you at the beginning. That's the FPV drone. That's a new one. I just picked it up last fall. I haven't flown with it enough to be comfortable using it commercially, but it's a great drone. My primary drone is a Mavic Pro 2, which is a lower end version of the Enterprise that you saw on the screen. And I also fly a Mini Pro 3, which is a really small compact drone. Bob's actually seen me fly that one. He couldn't believe. Funny story on that one. I'll tell this quick story. But when we went to, I actually had Bob do a visual observer for me on a project, and I brought the drone out. I said, I got to go to my car and grab my drone, and I'm start walking out to where we're going to get ready to fly the drone. And I've got this little pouch that's about the size of a fanny pack almost. And Bob goes, "Where's your drone?" I'm like, "It's right here." He goes, "No." And I pull it out and unfold it. He's like, "Son of a gun, you fit all that in a little tiny pouch." It doesn't look like anything. So that's one I use for the less intrusive type jobs. It's a little quieter drone. Don't have nosy neighbors going, "Why are you flying?" Because they can't hear it. Once it's up there, it's not too noisy. That's one of the other things you got to keep in mind when you're flying drones, though, is you're always going to have somebody wanting to know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and they're thinking you're out to get them somehow. But thank you for asking. So those are the three drones that I do use. I am probably by the end of this year going to be purchasing the Enterprise drone because I want to start offering for my business the thermal imaging, which I don't have thermal capabilities right now. But I want to start offering that for the energy efficiency pieces as well as putting my services out to roofers and siding.
The window washing thing is interesting. I actually saw a drone being used for power washing.
Yeah, they can actually run soap through those, power wash the side of the house or the building. Again, those are also being used now for firefighting. Like if it's a high rise, they're going to use it to get up to the top, so they don't have. If maybe it's a case where they can't get a ladder up high enough. Some of the local departments haven't gotten them yet, but I see that very soon. Matter of fact, I know I live here in Cumberland, and I know for a fact that the Cumberland Fire Department actually has on staff a drone pilot that has a thermal imaging drone that they use for search and rescue. So say a kid gets lost in the woods or you hear about these amber alerts or silver alerts, whatever they call them. They can go out and get a heat signature from somebody that's lost in the woods and find the person. So it's really cool.
Pretty wild.
Yeah. Any other questions? I don't want to. All right. Well, thank you
Thanks
so
again,
much.
Bill.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Thank you, all of you. I do appreciate you spending time with me this morning. I will send out a recording this afternoon. If you have any questions, please reach out to me at Reba. I'm more than glad to answer any questions you have on that. If you want more information on the website to get to Pilot Institute, if you want to get your license, again, please feel free to call me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. With that said, I think I'm going to close up the meeting and say one final thank you. Bob, thank you for playing me today. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Bill. Great job.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you very much.
Have a great day,
Take care,
everybody.
everybody. Have a good day.